Hi, my name is Brandon, and over the past year, the Delight Cafe team and I have traveled across the U.S. researching this rapidly growing industry of CBD products. What we have found throughout the industry were products that were inconsistent in dosage and used ingredients that weren't even lab tested. Products with chalky textures, bitter aftertaste, and worst of all, confusion among the CBD consumers. That's why we created Delight Cafe. A 15 milligram lab-tested, all-natural, water-soluble hemp CBD powder pack. It's odorless, colorless, and tasteless. Add it to your favorite drink of choice, wherever, whenever, on the go. Quickly find your calm, your balance, and your delight when you need it most.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the interactive session of One Square at a Time for the movies Despicable Me 1, 2, and 3. And Brandon's brought his own minion to the show. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We're really looking forward to this interactive session. I look forward to hopefully getting as many comments, questions, and if you want, bring in your own personal experiences, and we can talk about them in light of what we talk about for the Minions and Gru, of which Brandon is channeling his inner Gru right now. And looking forward to hearing more from Brandon on this. No, that's exactly what we wanted to hear from Brandon.
Oh, that was not Brandon. That was me, Bob.
I think that was Brandon being affected by the mutagen.
The mutagen? You mean my...
Yes, it was the mutagen that was turning the minions into the monsters. Remember? And then they would belch like you did.
I can't believe what I just walked in at.
Miss Jess, how you doing this fine day?
Jess, that is Miss Evil. She's over there. She's someone that is
Jess
not
is like the beautiful Julie who's got the great heart and is trying to save the world, and then just happens to run into Gru, which is kind of like Brandon, and initially has to change Brandon from the I would say slowly changing Brandon from the belching, uncouth at times.
I am never uncouth.
To the beautiful Brandon that is here to save the world. As I say that, Brandon shows his wonderful ability to eat. It's so fluffy, I'm going to die.
Keep running. All right.
Yes.
I'll focus. Sorry.
No problem. I think it's, it's dinner time, your time anyhow. 6 p.m. out on the East Coast, only 3 p.m. here in the Pacific time zone, the better time zone, I might add. I've
heard Central time zones is the best.
Actually, I grew up in the Central time zone, and I agree, because when you're watching Monday Night Football, it's not on too late. When you're watching shows in the news, they start at 10 instead of 11. It does give you more of an opportunity to sleep well. So
I am ready.
You are ready?
I am ready. Bob and I are ready for this. So, in the Despicable Me movies, the movie talk about my little minion guys. They are small. Ooh, I got a burp on him. They are small little guys that are my minions. and they follow the evil ones. We go together around and we go steal. We are good together. We steal. Wouldn't you say we steal, Brett?
You still, absolutely, you still.
We stole the moon. We stole the moon.
Yes, you stole the moon.
We stole the Statue of Liberty.
You stole the Statue of Liberty in Las Vegas.
It doesn't matter. I stole statue.
And you stole the Eiffel Tower out of
I
Las
did
Vegas.
the one in Las Vegas.
So, Mr. Brian Tracy, glad to see you out there as well. Absolutely. So, the Minions really hit home with me when they took, and it was a big deal here in Vegas when all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, the Statue of Liberty and the Eiffel Tower are gone. We had massive search out, and eventually we found out that it was Gru that stole it, and we got both of them back before most of the people even knew they were gone. So pretty amazing work by the Metro Police Department here in Las Vegas, along with the FBI and Delight Cafe in order to find the lost articles that Gru had stolen from Las Vegas.
So we chose Despicable Me, and you and I had a fun conversation with this one. Like, in all seriousness, we talked about all three. Now, I came in and I did my Groot, and that probably wasn't my best impression. I'm a big fan of these movies. It's because of the fact that it's kind of like what we're doing. They take something that is a very heavy topic, meaning like being the most evil person ever, and connecting stealing and all that with a cartoon, and then how they have the big change. So it's like what we do. We're trying to connect things that people don't usually connect, and to bring change and show something new. And with this, it opens up doors and opportunities for conversations. Now, this movie is fun. I threw some random trivia at you. Do you remember what the one was? That how do the Minions language? Why did the Minions language come about? How did it come about?
It was kind of a mixture of Francais and Anglais.
And then from there we had so you have French, you have English. The Minions were created. The movie wasn't even titled the same title. Do you remember what the original title was?
Evil Me.
Now, this movie has great interaction. It keeps kids' attention. It has lots of good things.
Hey, Peyton, how you doing today?
Peyton, how you doing, buddy? Peyton has a softball game in a few minutes, probably, so he's only here to say hi, but we're glad you came in. You love softball? God, you and him would be best friends. So tell me, Brett, your opinions on this movie and why, as an adult, we were able to find ways of making this help build leadership.
Well, I think that, the way that they actually constructed these movies from the original and then 2 and then 3 is that they start off by not really giving you a lot of background on Gru. He starts out being this super villain, and over the course of the initial movie, he comes into contact with the 3 girls that he actually adopted in order to be able to use in his crime-filled mind, but then ends up falling in love with them, and they turn him from the evil Gru to the good Gru. But we don't know why he was really so evil. And I think that is something that happens in our lives. People oftentimes grow up and we have a particular perspective on life. We have built our own belief systems, our own filters, unintentionally, I might add, not knowing why we are the way we are. Not, and even those that do recognize that, the past, meaning the things that we were taught when we were kids, when we were taught when we were in school, the experiences that we had as babies, as children, as adolescents, and even into your throughout life, I should say, affect the types of belief systems and filters and so forth that we have on life. But we don't most often consciously do that. They just build up based on events, then the meanings that we placed on the events. And the meanings we placed on the events are based on the filters and the belief systems that are in us that we didn't actually build, but those are now consciously and subconsciously changing or affecting the way that we perceive events that we experience in life. So this is what starts off in Despicable Me 1. In Despicable Me 2 is when we get it. Yes, sir.
No, I had two fingers up. Jessica.
Oh, I thought it went off screen, so I thought you were raising your hand to ask the question.
She was distracting me by sending me pictures of all 75 kids and her dressed as the Minions. And it literally was like, it totally threw me off. And it must have scared the dogs because they all started barking and running around. I'm like, I'm so glad I'm on mute. No, go ahead. So you are chapter 2. In the second movie.
So in the second movie, and again, this is all the things that we, and when I say we, and that's me inclusive, of how our belief systems were formed and how we may be able to consciously evaluate them as adults, but subconsciously and unconsciously, if you want to call it that, they're oftentimes built on events that we had as children that were emotionally impactful to us. And remember, any event that we tie and meaning that we tie emotions to, those are the ones that we experience in the most technicolor ways. They affect us the most significantly through our lives, because when you start tying emotions to meanings and events, those are the things that you remember. That's actually why women women in general, but really it's the feminine energy that has the ability to recall events usually much better than men or masculine energy, because the feminine energy ties emotions to events much stronger, much more often than the masculine. And if you think about it throughout life and your experiences with the opposite sex or the opposite energy, masculine and feminine energy, you begin to understand when you really consciously focus on it that, why is it that your mom remembered when you forgot to give her a Mother's Day card when you were 11 years old? Well, I had that experience with my mom, and she didn't talk to me for like 3 days. And I'm like, why?
What? For real?
For real. And I was like, why? And it was in her mind because I didn't remember or acknowledge Mother's Day that I was not
a good kid.
No, it wasn't that I wasn't a good kid. It was in her mind, I wasn't recognizing what she's done for me in my life.
Okay.
And the value of that. And that was an emotional response. And that emotional response is deep.
How old were you?
I literally was probably 10, 11 years old.
See, at the same age, I had my mom and I did the same thing with my ex-girlfriend, as Peyton says, for Valentine's Day, because I worked. Oops. I've had that as well. Like, I've upset my mom. I remember one year I upset my mom on Mother's Day, and I made her a card, and my emotional response was I crumpled up the card and threw it away. Now, I will reply back to this with this. We didn't talk for a few days, like you said, but
Right.
I did recently. That's funny you bring this up because I wasn't ever going to tell this story, but like recently I found that card in my mom's drawer when I was helping move stuff. She went and took it out of the garbage because she was like, you just had an emotional response. You were a kid. So that's why I was like, it's kind of funny how the balance comes into play with that. But with the Minions, you were making the point of how his wife, what's her name again? I wrote it down, but my paper's downstairs.
Julie.
Oh yeah, Julie.
Julie. Oh no, that was Judy. Anyhow, that dates me way back when.
I was like, I know that one. That one takes you back, buddy.
Yeah.
But Groot and her were in the first one. Obviously, everybody knows the first Despicable Me. How Groot was this big hard criminal, and he goes around and steals. And then in the second one, he's more about the girls because we saw him fall in love and break his the Grinch. His hard heart. We saw the heart break, and he goes
the shrunken heart grow
3 times. Three
Yes.
times as much. It go boom, boom, boom. So he turned around, and he has Miss Julie, and Miss Julie helps him find his inner self and who Groot really is. In the second one, in the third one, it takes all of them and the kids, all the little kids, walking around, going around, and doing things. And let's just be honest, the best part of all of it is the fluffiness. So, you were saying in the second one how Miss Julie comes along and helps Groot.
Yes, actually, the first thing that really starts to bring back things that we don't oftentimes remember when we're kids is the scene where the girls are talking about Gru, and he should find somebody to date, or he met Julie and he's kind of thinking about wanting to ask her out, but one of the girls says, "But you're afraid." And as soon as she said that, in his memory, he goes back to the playground when he was a kid with the flower that he was going to present to the girl that he liked. And he's standing there so innocently and so scared because he's not been treated well up to that point anyhow. It's obvious by the response that's going to happen. And then he tries to tap the girl on her elbow in order to give her the flower. And as soon as he does, all the other kids in the playground go, "Oh, Gru just touched her, and now she's got Grooties." And they all scream and run away, and he's standing there with the flower in his hand.
And
he just experienced the worst that he actually imagined could happen, and the reason why he was so afraid to give the flower to the girl.
Have you ever had that?
I have had similar kinds of situations. When I grew up, I remember being called Bertha Butt. And this was by the girls in grade school. So
what is Bertha Butt? Like, how are they making fun of you? Your name's Brett.
I honestly don't know exactly how that.
Did you have a big
why
butt?
That term came up?
Did you have a big butt?
Maybe I did. I don't remember so much.
Don't lie to me.
I don't know.
Because I like butts and I cannot lie.
I did try to compete with my father in terms of eating food when I was a kid, and unfortunately, it's kind of still hung with me even now. But that I think it has more to do with the fact that when I was in grade school, I was the teacher's pet.
And I could see that.
And even though I was athletic and played sports and things along those lines, I was still the teacher's pet, the nerd, the one who got the grades, the one who had the answers, essentially kind of like the Hermione Granger of my class, except that I didn't really talk that much, but I would always try to make sure that, if I knew the answer, that I gave the answer. So I think that was part of the reason. And there were a couple other instances in grade school that I had. And, these may be experiences that others have had out there where I was also one of the smaller kids, really. So I remember one time where there was a big kid for our age. I mean, big guy. And he used to make fun of me and call me names and things like that. And the friends that I had. And then finally one day I just got tired of it, so fed up with it that he called a name or did something and was walking away. And I just jumped on his back and put him in a chokehold, and he fell to the ground and he started crying. And from that point on, there was no more problem in terms of him being the bully, because he really wasn't. He was just taking advantage and intimidating because of his size. And that happens to kids and adults all the time. I had the same thing happen even in high school, where, I knew some football players, and they weren't being mean to me per se, but they wanted me to help them to pass tests. So can I copy off of your paper while we're doing it? I want to sit next to you when we have the test and make sure that you keep your test so that I can see it.
Okay.
And, it was an intimidating thing. I'll say that now, going back to high school reunions and stuff, great friends with them. Life changes. I was not the woman's man by any means in grade school, in high school, or for that matter in college. But when I go back to my reunions now in high school, I get along much. I mean, like a part of I'm just part of them now, talking and having fun, joking around and stuff. But when I was in high school, no, I was again part of the uncool nerd crew. There were a lot of cliques, because in high school especially, but even in grade school and junior high, people start connecting with each other. They create their own little groups. Those groups, depending on whether you're and I say the cool kids or the nerds or whatever, each group has their own identity, kind of.
Correct.
And that identity can be empowering or overpowering. Yeah. And there's others that are underserved by their beliefs in a particular situation. So, for instance, the nerd crew may not be the ones that are the cool kids going out after school and partying and having the relationships and going to prom and all that kind of stuff. The nerds were the ones that excelled by being focused on school and impressing the teachers and themselves primarily, competition within themselves. But that was the kind of competition that they had, recognizing that they were not going to be the ones that were, well, oftentimes we were on the sideline saying, gosh, I wish I knew there was a party, or I would feel comfortable going to the party, but we didn't, because we weren't part of that group. And that's the kind of thing that really formed Gru's evilness, because of like this event in the playground, and also his belief that if he were to ask Julie out on a date, she would say no, she would reject him. And I can relate to this one very much, and I am going to guess that there's a lot of people out in the audience as well, where they saw people that they would love to be able to be with and talk to and ask out, but instead of being rejected, they just chose not to ask at all. So that I wouldn't be accused of giving somebody my broodies are you know, the
I'm just letting you go. Like, I'm just gonna be sitting here. This is fun. Like, I put the bottom. So people leave a comment, guys. Were you the bookworm? Are you a nerd? Were you the jock? Maybe you were a player. In high school, were you the class clown? Or if you don't want to tell us what you were, tell us what you think I was, because I think you'd be surprised.
Yeah, I would love to hear, you know, more from the audience. And what I'm trying to really do is hit upon, you know, a lot of the different things. Fear of the Grudies. Exactly. And Jess, I'm sure that you've probably experienced some of these things as the kids go out and play. I know your kids are homeschooled and things along those lines. And there may even be some of this even within a family when you have, you know, 87 kids. You have a lot of little cliques and things like that. But oh yeah, so there you go. I was in every music program. So you had those in school that were like the Thespians or the Madrigal Singers, and they were their own kind of identity.
Yes.
And then there were the band members, and they had their own identity. So the band members are there, you know, at the football games, but they're entertaining themselves as much as they are the audience, because they're having fun within their own group, their identity within their own group. I sit at the cool table here. I
was leaving it alone to be nice. I was like, I'm going to get it in a minute. I will get it. Like, oh, that was a good one, Jess. I love you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the way that I feel when I go back now to the reunions. Is actually, I feel like I'm one of the cool ones, and I'll go and talk to the people that I didn't talk to when I was in high school. I can interact with them now in a way that I didn't at that time, because my identity isn't so much tied to what it was back in school. And you know, being shy is something that is a very common thing within children. And usually it is. Being shy oftentimes is tied to that fear of rejection, that fear of stepping out of our comfort zone and then being shot down and retreating back into our shells. Hey, Stuart, how you doing today? It's one of those things that, you know, once we experience it, and especially when we experience it in an emotional situation, which oftentimes is not necessarily so emotional initially, except that when we get rejected, others around us saw that, and then they're like, oh man, did you see that? He just asked her and she turned him down just flat like that. You know, it was like, no way am I going out with you. And then because of that experience, you really take it and you add even deeper emotions to it. And those deep emotions stay with us as we grow into adults. And oftentimes we don't even think of it. And you even see that when Gru, when I think it was Agnes or maybe Edith, but I think maybe Agnes said, you know, are you afraid? And that triggered in his mind to go back to that scene, which is oftentimes what happens to us as adults. We don't even think about what happened. You know, I didn't even think about being called Bertha, but for a long time. But as we're talking about it here, boom, it brings back that memory. That memory brings back those, and it can bring back those memories very vividly. And which is good and bad. If you don't recognize the events and the emotions that that trigger your actions as adults, you can't address them. You have to find them first.
Yeah.
And then once you've identified them, then you have the choice of changing them. But oftentimes we never trigger that memory enough to come back and actually enable us to trigger them. And there's times if something is is traumatic enough that our brain, in order to protect ourselves, our brain actually compartmentalizes something and puts it off to where we don't even know or can find it unless we go into some sort of a bit of a hypnotic state, a meditative state, a very focused state to try and draw things out. And we oftentimes don't want to do that because it can be a very, very traumatic, painful state to incorporate, abuse and rape and things along those lines. And in our mind, in order to protect ourselves, has compartmentalized that and held it off to the side and blocked us from being able to see it and recognize it. And yet it does affect our belief systems, our actions, our filters, and our emotions, but we don't know why. Sometimes it's a trigger could be as simple as a smell.
Yes.
When you're walking down the street, and you go past a Starbucks, you smell the coffee. You go past a donut shop, you smell the donuts.
The coffee.
You go past a hot dog stand and you smell the food. Now, oftentimes that brings back good memories, or it makes you hungry, or it may, but other times in other people, it can bring back significant traumatic experiences that occurred to that. So for instance, even though Starbucks is very benign, if they smell the coffee, it could be associated to something when they were a kid where in the mornings there was coffee being brewed and it was an experience where you were being treated poorly by a parent, a person of significance around you. And you've got this now very traumatic negative thing tied to the smell of coffee. And you walk past a Starbucks and you were having a great day. You were just kind of strolling down, having a good day. You walk past the Starbucks, you smell the coffee, and all of a sudden this depression descends upon you. And you don't know why. Well, those are the types of things that can happen. Brian, what are you talking about there about Farron?
No, don't go there.
No, I'm not going there.
It's not appropriate for this. I do like Jessica complimenting you and then baiting me. Brett is so good at not being distracted. And you're talking about how smells trigger thing. And she goes, and sometimes you could smell what the Rock is cooking. I had to literally, I go, oh, I got to act like I don't see that one because that made me laugh. But no, you're right. Like for some people, it's a trigger. They smell something. They could see something. Crystal Wolf is back. Hey Crystal. But it's one of these things where it can trigger things. And for Groot, that was where you were going with that. It connected because he had a trigger that was all of a sudden having him go. It's like something we all experience.
Yes.
And you were explaining how the two connect with Groot and you. And it connected as, are you scared, Jessica? No, she's not scared. I had to think about that one. Have you ever had, he's saying scared. It's the slang. I got you. I got you, boo. But with with Gru, it's you see, now I'm distracted by them. So with Gru, because I want to play. It's been a long few days of work. I'm ready to play. With Gru and that, he had that trigger that found him, and he was able to, he snapped into a bad spot again. And I think we all know what that feels like. I have triggers that maybe aren't a smell, but sometimes people say things that when it triggers me, it gets negative thinking in my head. Like, you're a piece of shit, Brandon. Brandon sucks. Brandon this. But the thing is, you have to learn how to self-talk to switch that. And in that movie, Groot is teaching us that a little more.
Right. And, another thing that we didn't really talk about in the recorded version is Dr. Nefario. So Dr. Nefario, he was Gru's compatriot in crime and evilness and creating the inventions that Gru was able to use to in his thievery and theft and everything that he was doing. And in the second Despicable Me, Dr. Nefario, because Gru became a good guy, Dr. Nefario still related to the evilness, and he eventually left Gru, and Gru didn't know where he went, but he left Gru because he wanted to continue to be evil. That's where he felt his strength was, his power was, his identity was in being evil. And he went over, and eventually we find out that he's the one who created the what do they call that thing again? The mutagen that changed minions into these monsters. And he was working for El Macho, who was the super criminal. And Gru didn't know this. Then they were kidnapping all of the minions, and they were bringing them in, and then they were giving them this mutagen and making them into these terrible creatures that were then going to be used to kind of go out and control the world as part of El Macho's army. But what happens is El Macho, deep down though, exactly. The loyalty that Dr. Nefario had and that came out, and this is something that's really important to us as people in life, is El Macho kidnapped the girls. El Macho kidnapped Julie.
Yes.
And he was going to use them to really get to Gru. And Dr. Nefario saw this. And that's when Dr. Nefario switched back and created the antigen, or the thing that's going to be able to turn the minions back to the minions.
Yeah.
And join forces with the minions again to change all those that had been changed into monsters back into the minions. And he said the reason he did that is that I'm evil, but if you mess with my family, I'm going to basically mess with you.
Yep.
And that's finding the higher power. Oftentimes when we're having challenges in life, when we say that we can't change, what we can't do something, it's impossible to do something, it's because we don't have a big enough why to power that change, to overcome those obstacles. And the selection of jams and jellies that we choose to use to be able to make those changes. Dr. Nefario looked at the girls and Julie as family. And when El Macho messed with them, all of a sudden his why changed. His why for being evil changed to, I may still want to be evil, but I'm sure as hell not going to support El Macho and what he's doing because he's messing with my family. And we experience this in life oftentimes where we don't get along maybe with our brothers and our sisters or even some of the friends that we grew up with. But then when they get messed with, all of a sudden we're like, no, don't be doing that shit. You mess with them, I'm going to get back at you.
Correct.
All of a sudden, a higher power, a higher meaning in life has been triggered, and boom, we take on the strength, the superpower, and the wherewithal to be able to overcome the challenges or to go after whoever is messing with me.
I'm so sorry.
The minion.
So Mama Bear does,
Sure.
and that's true. I've seen Jessica turn
Exactly. Mama Bear comes out.
Yup. Stuart, I honestly did not know you only had one working eye. And so the Stuart Minion is really based on you. That's awesome. Boom, right here. I always have you present with me. I love it.
Yep.
I love it. By the way, Crystal, you might have a minion, minions that are bigger than mine, but it's not about the size of the minion. It's how you love it.
Oh, there you go. There you go. And, that's actually another great thing, especially for guys and even for girls. There are certain body parts that there's this belief that the bigger, the better. And if I don't, and if mine isn't as big as theirs, then I'm lesser than them. And we take that on as kids because those are the things that we learn. Those are the things that we may see. Those are the opinions that we may get. So we either try to overcompensate.
Yeah.
Using steroids and building muscles when it's mainly for show, especially, is usually trying to overcome some sort of a self-doubt or a self-image issue that we have. And we choose to do whatever we can to overcome that, to build up that part. In fact, my brother, and this may have happened in other people's families, but my brother, I always said he was smarter than me. He never believed that, but I truly do believe that. And I used to envy him because he could go out and talk to the girls. He was the one who was like kind of the life of the party. He was a relatively not skinny, but thin person that could he just had a blast when he was a kid. And somewhere along the line, he equated his being thin and still athletic, but thin, to not being enough. And he felt he needed to build his muscles. And he got into weightlifting and things along those lines and things that helped your muscles to grow. But eventually in the gym, he had an incident where, because of the testosterone or whatever else, may have been affecting him, he tried to overlift and just literally blew out some discs in his back, to the point to where everybody in the gym looked over at him because he said it sounded like a shotgun. And that was all in trying to, impress himself, impress others, build those muscles to overcome that self-doubt, that self-image thing that had somehow gotten into his mind. And we have those things, and even on the nerd side, that's when we really get deeper into the books, deeper into our knowledge. Oftentimes it's got nothing to do with being a nerd, but we've got this desire to be right. And we will stick with that concept of being right, regardless of whether we find out evidence that really proves us wrong, but we still need to be right. So we're going to continue to push whatever that position was that we started with, rather than to back off and say, oh, wow, new information. Yeah, actually, I was there. And to realize that that's not taking away from us. In fact, that's empowering us. You are empowered when you can actually look at what you have believed in the past and say, oh, I got some new information. And guess what? What I did believe isn't correct or doesn't support me now in this part of my life.
Yeah.
And Gru had that going on throughout the movies as well, where he started to take on, more of an identity of a superhero. And he was hired by the Anti-Villain League to track down villains and become part of the good guy group, and to be able to prove and show his goodness to Julie and to kids and to the world, because he changed from this identity and belief of evilness as being his superpower to being good as his superpower. And we all have that ability. We just don't oftentimes get to a position or create or recognize a higher power that moves us in that direction. And I think, Brandon, even, a lot of the stuff that you're doing here with the Light Digital Cafe, the Light CBD is all in trying to move people and ultimately may affect humanity in a good way, to create a platform, to create a channel, to create shows like this where we can help people to build a greater positivity in their life.
I agree. And that's the whole point of this, and that's why we have what we do. It's to find your best you. And I'm having fun reading the comments too. By the way, I got to do this really quick. This is adorable here. How Krista's talking about how she has a bigger Bob than me, minion than me. And I made my joke, and Stuart's response is, she loves me just fine because he is Stuart. Remember? That's what he said earlier.
Yep.
It's him. Absolutely adorable comments right there in that. I loved it. And for what you're saying, I 100% agree. Do you remember what we said the tool was, or who the tool is?
Who the tool is?
That's the joke, but yes.
What the tool is?
I was giving you a chance to make fun of me, and I left the joke hanging for you, and but you.
Yes, I remember what the tool is. Here I'm channeling my Dr. Nefario. I'm channeling my inner Dave and Jerry. I got my 2-eye goggles on, and I am looking through a different color. Which is changing my view on everything that I see in life. And this is what we can do. Oftentimes when we get into a depression state or one of feeling less than, the color of our glasses becomes kind of, if you want to think about it, maybe grayish and dark. And when we see everything around us, it's all filtered through that grayish, that darkness, that less empowering colors. And then we can put on, in this case, I got kind of green turquoise. So, okay, life is now turquoise. And for some people, turquoise may be empowering. For others, it might not. Put on yellow glasses and see things in a brightness like behind Brandon. You've got the yellow happiness. I've got a friend that I went to high school with, who is one of the leading prolotherapists in the world. And prolotherapy is a way to deal with, tendon problems and ligament problems without having to do surgery. Anyhow, he, in his practice, has nothing but bright colors throughout his office. He wears mostly yellow, bright yellow colored scrubs and things like that. And that's when he walks into to talk to his patients, because he wants to bring out a different view than the typical white dress and stuff that doctors have. And it's a change in perspective. If your doctor into your office, like wearing a clown nose and things like that, when he walked in to see children that were, going through cancer and serious diseases, he changes the perspective of and enables him to get more into their world, to better understand them, so that he can better offer service and treatment and connection with them, so that they can heal better. Feel better, heal better.
I believe it also does. The reason Patch Adams, I love Patch Adams. I've looked into him before. Like I like that movie, but my thing is, change of perspective is the best way of phrasing it, because the truth is, he comes in and he changed how you would think of yourself. He changed how the diagnosis sounded. He changed, not like it's like, oh, you're sick to you're not sick. He changed it as in, all right, yeah, it sucks, but we're going to actually put our best foot forwards. Yeah, it sucks, but we're going to do this together. And when you hear somebody tell you that, like, all right, so yeah, fuck Joe, but at the end of the day, you still got to deal with all these other things. How are you going to do it? You need those people around you that make it stronger, just like Gru needed with the minions, just like Gru needed with the girls. He needed somebody to help him see that his perception is different than who he really is, and he was letting others lead his perception.
Right, and you know, just so that we can touch upon Despicable Me 3, we had I want to say Benjamin Bratt, but that's not right because that's an actor. There was the evil Brat, Balthazar Brat, who was a former child actor. And while he was the young, cute kid as the child, his show was popular. He was popular. Everything was going good. This is something we can often relate to as well. And then as we get into our adolescence, all of a sudden our body starts to grow in ways that we didn't know. We start to get zits. We start to get facial hairs. We start to get, we may even start to lose hair. And then all of a sudden that changes our perception of ourselves. That changes how others look at us. And he went from being this child star that was adored to being, eventually the show was canceled because his image no longer matched what the show was. And from there, because of that rejection, he turned into the evil brat. And from that point on, he really started to move down this path of terror, if you want to call it that, in order to be able to make himself powerful and feel empowered by the evilness and control that he could exert on others. And those things happen in lives, the lives of our children, the lives of ourselves, the lives of those around us. And they constantly happen. Actually, it's not something that just happens when we're kids or adolescents or adults. We change based on the events and then the emotions that we tie to those events, then tie to our belief systems, our filters, etc. And all of a sudden, the entire world starts to look that way.
Yes.
And that kind of goes along with some other parts of our brain, like the amygdala and the reticular activating system, where if we start to focus on something, all of a sudden we see more and more and more of it. And the brain naturally does those things. So if we focus on the evil, then we're going to start to pick up evilness. And that reinforces our belief system that we're starting to build. And pretty soon that becomes very near and dear to our identity. And the same thing can go that if we start looking at the positive and the positive and the positive and the positive, that every time we look at even a very challenging or what we feel is an impossible situation, we still are looking at it in a positive light, saying, hey, what's good about this? What can I learn from it? What can I change? Even if it's just a little bit, how can I inch that forward into a positive light as opposed to a negative light? And this is life. And, although I know that I haven't called out everybody in terms of what they've said, I try to touch upon those as I see them coming up in the comments. In future episodes of this, please, if you want to actually come on live with us,
we'd love to have you.
We can make that happen. And then we can interact, directly with questions and answers immediately on screen if you want. But I think that Despicable Me just was an awesome depiction of growth. And that growth in both a positive, a negative, and in like Dr. Nefario's situation, going from negative to further negative, then back to positive and supporting the new Gru and the minions in their life of helping others as opposed to being evil. So life can change. It's all a matter of perspective. It's all a matter of finding that higher power. It's all a matter of, Gru's identity now being a father and a good husband and a good person, as opposed to his identity prior of, there he goes, stealing the moon in order to be able to impress others, to impress his mother, to impress whomever, that he has the ability to do something that outshines others.
Yeah.
And we all need to be significant in life. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's a matter of how we choose to get that significance. Do we do it in a positive way? Do we do it in a negative way? Do we influence our kids? And you have to actively think. And this is where, I really am impressed. And I'm not a parent, but I look at, the types of situations that parents go through, and talking with Jess and her 87 kids, or however many she has today. Maybe it's 99 now. I'm not sure.
It was 75. So hold on. Let me do the math really quick. Get my abacus out. She should be at like 84.
Okay, so 84. And each one of those 84 kids has their own little personality. And yet you need to kind of connect with it, and then you need to guide it. And the best way to guide it is to get into it, and then to be able to, get into their world so that you can guide them along, as opposed to pulling them along based on what your belief systems are and your natural energies are. Because as we find out in life, some people are much more gregarious and people than others that are more introverted and love to read books and love to get into the details and things along those lines. And if you don't get into each other's world and really relate to them in their world, it's very difficult to guide them. And you're trying to pull and oftentimes you just create a greater resistance. Mm-hmm. Because they're not seeing things from your eyes and you're not seeing things from their eyes. So put on their color glasses, and all of a sudden you're going to be able to connect in ways and guide them in ways that is empowering to them and moving them in a direction maybe that you also would like to see them grow. But you have to recognize that everybody does have their own paths. And if we can just create empowering pathways, regardless of which direction they go, they could go into the arts, the sciences, the theater, or just helping humanity. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if we're moving in a positive light. And the best way to do that is by getting into their world, seeing things through their color glasses, and then communicating with them in a way that reaches their higher power, their why in life. And oftentimes we don't even know what those are, but you can kind of guess. And certain, when you get to know somebody, if you really are paying attention to your children, and sometimes your children will surprise you. Sometimes your children will tell you things that they were afraid to before.
Yeah.
Because they were afraid of what that might mean. Will you reject me if I tell you I'm this kind of person versus that kind of person? And when we address them with love and try to get more into their world and what they're feeling, that's when we can be most impactful to them, most comforting to them, most empowering to them, so that they can then be empowered in their own ways, in their own life, because now they're comfortable that at least those that are most influential to me didn't reject me and are supporting me as I grow in my direction, which may not be the direction that we actually grew in ourselves.
Correct.
And Despicable Me just goes through that whole realm of things, I think, and that's what makes it such an awesome series. And I'm glad we got a chance to do this together.
I agree. Excuse me. I'm sorry about that. Are you excited for next week? Do you know what we're going to be recording tomorrow?
Actually, I think that we're not going to record tomorrow. And we're going to use one of our previously recorded versions, which is actually going to be really cool for the audience because you will be able to see how Brandon and I have actually grown as we've gone from where we started to where we are now.
Before anybody gets on me about not having a Minion onesie, I just don't have one yet. Despicable Me Despicable Me 4 will be coming out this year, or is it next year?
I think next year is when it's supposed to be planned. I think it was 2022.
That's what I thought. I will have a Minions onesie by then, and I will be happy to come visit the Dugas clan and wear it with all of them. Brett Gordon, I just want you to know. Oh, it is this year. I knew she would know.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
I knew someone would be able to pull it out. Krista, thank you. So, Brett, remembering to see others' perspectives is important. Making sure you get through it all. Do you have anything else to add?
And to make sure that we actually learn what our triggers are and go back and try to figure those out because they affect us for the rest of our life, just like Grudy's affected Gru all the way up until he really became the great father and the great husband when he finally had the guts or the confidence to ask Julie, and then they got married. Brandon is truly a unicorn.
Ah, Shanya, got a fluffy. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you have a great day. Don't forget, other people's perspectives are all in the way you look at them. If somebody's too bright, maybe put your glasses on and get used to it, because the truth is, the brighter the light, the brighter they shine. The brighter they are, the more you learn. Brett Gordon, you're one of the brightest things in my life. I need to wear shades every time I'm around you, my man. Brett, anything else before we go? Because I'm going to give everybody some love.
Just tune in on Monday. We'll let you know what the new movie is that we're going to have reviewed and drop that on Monday so that you can watch the movie, watch the review, and be involved in our discussion come next Thursday as we again bring you into our world and hopefully us into your world so that we can all grow together. And that's what One Square at a Time is all about.
The bigger the hair, the bigger the heart. That's all I got to say, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great one.
All right. Take care, everybody.